There is a rare and silent moment when everything within you becomes still. There is no longer a need to search obsessively for signs or to force answers. The outer world loses its weight, and suddenly an inner whisper arises, subtle yet unmistakable. It is not an ordinary sound, nor does it come from the senses. It is the universe, in its symbolic language, speaking through the soul. When love is true, it does not shout. It resonates in the depths, touching parts of you that you did not even know were alive. It is not about destiny written in the stars, but an archetypal calling that echoes through the unconscious, leading you to what completes, challenges, and transforms you. True love is, above all, an inner journey of listening. If you feel that true love goes beyond the surface, comment below, "I am ready to hear what the universe has to say." And take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your support in the comments. This strengthens this space of awareness and allows us to keep bringing content like this. From the perspective of Carl Jung's analytical psychology, true love is not merely the meeting of two people, but a powerful manifestation of the individuation process. What we call the whisper of the universe is in truth the symbolic communication of the deep unconscious, where the self resides, the organizing center of the psyche that strives for wholeness. When this love arises, it does not come to comfort, it comes to reveal. The other becomes a mirror, and in that reflection we see parts of ourselves that had been forgotten, denied, or hidden in the shadow. The shadow, a central concept in Jung's thought, represents all that we reject in ourselves for not fitting the image we have built of who we are. True love often awakens these shadowy regions, not to harm us, but so we can integrate them and become more whole. The deep attraction we feel is often the psyche's movement to unite inner opposites, such as the animus and anima, the archetypes of masculine and feminine present in every human being, regardless of gender. Projection is also a central mechanism in this process. At first, we tend to project onto the other everything we idealize, believing we have found the other half of the soul. But with time, the veil of projection falls, revealing reality. And it is at this point that true love distinguishes itself from illusion. It endures when the projection dissolves, because its foundation is not idealization, but a profound recognition of essence. Thus, when the universe whispers, it does so through symbols, synchronistic encounters, and inner sensations that point to something greater. It is not about magic, but about listening. To truly love is, above all, to commit to one's own transformation. At the beginning of a meaningful love connection, there is something that escapes common logic. They are encounters that do not feel random, synchronicities that arise effortlessly, glances that carry more than words. According to Carl Jung, the collective unconscious manifests through symbols, dreams, and events with archetypal content, that is, universal patterns that reveal deep truths of the soul. When a love bond begins under this symbolic atmosphere, it requires sensitivity and inner listening to perceive that it is not just about chemistry or compatibility, but about something that calls for transformation. These signs are not necessarily spectacular, they are often subtle. A vivid dream of an unknown figure that later resembles the person you have just met. An inexplicable feeling of familiarity, as if the soul recognized the other before the mind tried to understand. A symbol that repeats itself, a song, an animal, an image, coinciding with the moments when this person appears or draws closer to your life. Jung called this synchronicity, when two events, with no apparent causal link, manifest together with profound meaning. In those moments, it is as if the universe were saying, "Pay attention," but this voice of the universe is not external. It comes from the unconscious, echoing through symbolic language. The problem is that in modern life, people have lost sensitivity to that language. They seek rational confirmations, compatibility tests, objective security, and in doing so, they ignore the deeper calls of the soul. True love as a manifestation of the self does not arrive shouting. It arrives whispering within, and only those who allow silence can hear it. Recognizing these signs is not an exercise in superstition or fortune-telling. It is, above all, a dive into symbolic listening. When you feel that a connection speaks to you in a way that defies rational explanation, when you notice life mysteriously rearranging itself around that encounter, the unconscious is at work. Love is not just a feeling, but a channel of communication between the soul and the world. A love connection then becomes a mirror of the individuation process. It is important to say that not every initial enchantment means a connection destined to last. The unconscious often brings people into our path not to remain, but to reveal something. The whisper of the universe can be an invitation to healing, to breaking free of old patterns, to reintegrating forgotten parts. That is why discernment between signal and fantasy is essential. An authentic sign of the unconscious does not bring confusion, obsession, or dependence. It brings depth, recognition, and even in uncertainty, an inexplicable inner peace. By recognizing these symbolic signs, one can enter a relationship more consciously. Instead of getting lost in expectations or idealizations, you begin to observe the connection as a field of revelation. The other ceases to be only an object of desire and becomes a vehicle for self-knowledge. Love then transforms into a path of encountering your own mystery. Being open to this type of listening requires courage. It means letting go of control, of ready-made formulas, of generic advice about relationships. It demands trusting more in feeling than in knowing, more in intuition than in reason. It is in this fertile ground that true love grows, not on the surface of encounters, but in the depths where the symbol speaks and the unconscious reveals what the mind cannot yet name. When the universe whispers, it does so in the silence between thoughts, in the details that escape logic, in the intimate sensation that the encounter carries something to teach. To hear this whisper is the first step toward surrendering to a love that transcends the ordinary and touches the eternal. When entering a love relationship, we rarely see the other as they truly are. What we see instead are parts of ourselves projected onto that person. Carl Jung explained that projection is a natural and inevitable psychic mechanism, especially in the early stages of a bond. We project onto the other aspects of our psyche that we have not recognized, both idealized qualities and repressed content. What deeply enchants us in someone is often a symbolic representation of what has not yet fully awakened within us. This initial projection is inevitable and, to a degree, necessary. It creates fascination, desire, idealization. However, when it does not become conscious, it turns into a trap. The person we love is no longer themselves, but a mirror of our fantasy. We begin to expect them to fill inner gaps, heal old wounds, or embody an impossible ideal. When the other inevitably fails to fulfill that role, frustration, conflict, and often rupture appear, not because love has ended, but because the projected image has begun to dissolve. At this point, the shadow comes into play. For Jung, the shadow represents all aspects of the personality we reject or repress, because they do not align with our self-image. These shadow contents, insecurities, jealousy, fear, control, dependency, often emerge strongly within intimate relationships, especially when love is true. The partner becomes the stage where these shadows are projected, often generating accusations, judgments, and destructive dynamics. Curiously, what most irritates or disappoints us in the other often points to something unresolved within ourselves. The jealousy we feel may reveal our insecurity. The other's coldness may expose our need for affection. Constant criticism may hide our fear of being seen as fragile. Instead of blaming or trying to mold the other, analytical psychology suggests turning inward and asking, "What is this discomfort revealing about me?" This is an act of courage and emotional maturity, essential for love to grow without being suffocated by projections. In choosing a partner, there is an unconscious dance between shadow and desire. Many times, we are drawn precisely to those who awaken our deepest wounds. This is not a mistake, it is an opportunity. When we recognize that the relationship is revealing hidden parts of our psyche, we can stop reacting automatically and begin integrating those parts. True intimacy does not arise when the other meets all our expectations, but when we are able to remain present even before the uncomfortable aspects the relationship reveals. Jung affirmed that psychological marriage only happens when projections are withdrawn. At this point, we begin to see the other as they truly are, a complex human being with lights and shadows, virtues and limitations, and at the same time, we begin to see ourselves more clearly. Love then ceases to be idealization and becomes acceptance, not in a passive or resigned way, but as an active gesture of awareness and presence. This process is neither quick nor easy. Many relationships end when projections fall. because partners are unwilling to do the inner work required at that moment. But when both commit to this path, the relationship transforms into a sacred space of individuation. Each conflict becomes a mirror, each difficulty a portal, each shadow a chance for reintegration. Therefore, recognizing the role of projections and the shadow in partner choice is an essential step toward living true love. It is necessary to dismantle the fantasy so that reality can bloom. The universe whispers, but it also tests. And one of the deepest ways of listening to this call is to observe, with honesty and courage, what the other awakens in us. Not only what is beautiful, but also what is difficult, challenging, uncomfortable. Love, when true, does not spare us from the confrontation with the shadow, but offers us the rare chance to embrace it. And in doing so, we discover not only who the other is, but who we truly are. In the inner journey proposed by Carl Jung, the individuation process represents the realization of the self in its wholeness. It is a constant movement of integration between opposites in the psyche, seeking unity between the conscious and the unconscious. On this path, true love is not only a feeling or a deep emotional experience, but a powerful catalyst capable of accelerating transformations that alone would take much longer to access. When love arrives with depth and truth, it stirs the soul to move toward wholeness, even if for this, it must dismantle old structures. In the context of individuation, the presence of a significant partner acts as a mirror of one's own soul. The other awakens what is latent, reveals old wounds, but also activates dormant potentials. They challenge our defenses, our rigidity, our protective mechanisms. At the same time, they offer acceptance, presence, and the possibility of belonging. This duality, comfort and confrontation, is the essence of transformative love. It is not a love that accommodates, but one that unsettles, and precisely because of this, it is the kind of love that propels us toward the deepest inner growth. Individuation requires us to face our own shadow, to embrace what was denied, to confront what was repressed, and it is in the most intimate relationships that these parts emerge most strongly. When love is true, it does not cover the shadow, but reveals it with delicacy and depth. This revelation, however uncomfortable, is one of the most powerful forms of personal evolution. To truly love is to accept that the other has the power to touch places within us we did not know existed, and still choose to remain and transform. The process becomes even deeper when love is reciprocal and conscious. In this dynamic, both become allies in the journey of individuation. Each takes responsibility for their own projections, embraces their wounds, communicates their needs with clarity and vulnerability. Perfection is not demanded, but presence. Completeness is not required, but the other is recognized as a portal to one's own wholeness. The relationship then becomes more than an emotional construction. It becomes a spiritual practice, a path of continuous self-knowledge. There is an archetypal force behind this type of love. It manifests not only as desire or affinity, but as a calling from the self, the deepest instance of the psyche, that invites the symbolic union of inner feminine and masculine. The love connection becomes a living stage where archetypes manifest, where ancient dramas repeat, so they may finally be healed. True love does not come to reproduce patterns, but to break them. It leads us, gently or not, to the center of our own soul. That is why true love is not comfortable in the ordinary sense. It pulls us out of our safety zone, questions our certainties, challenges our masks, and in doing so, it leads us to essential truth. It is no wonder that so many stories of profound love encounters are marked by moments of crisis and inner rupture. This is not a problem in the relationship, but a friction between the self we were and the self we are becoming. Love, in this context, is a passage, a rite of transformation. Individuation, when accompanied by an authentic love relationship, becomes less solitary and more fruitful. There is a strength born of the true encounter between two souls who choose to look at each other with honesty. This strength does not eliminate fear, but moves through it. It does not erase pain, but gives it new meaning. And above all, it does not dissolve the self into the other, but strengthens each individual in their uniqueness. The paradox is this: by loving deeply, we become more ourselves. The experience of true love, therefore, is not an escape from reality, but a deeper immersion into it. It is a mirror of the unconscious calling to the surface everything that must be seen, accepted, and transformed. By answering this call, by listening to this silent whisper that only the awakened heart recognizes, the soul moves toward its wholeness, and the journey of individuation ceases to be only a Jungian ideal to become, in fact, a concrete, embodied, living experience. At the core of Jung's analytical psychology lies an essential principle for emotional maturity and the experience of conscious love, the integration of the archetypes of animus and anima. Anima is the representation of the feminine in a man's psyche, animus of the masculine in a woman's psyche. But more than gender-related categories, these archetypes symbolize complementary psychic qualities that we all carry. The balance between these inner aspects makes authentic relationships possible, where the other is loved for who they are, not as a projection of an unresolved lack. When these archetypes are unconscious or unintegrated, we tend to project them onto our partners. The man, for example, projects his anima onto an idealized woman, often sweet, sensitive, intuitive, maternal, or seductive, depending on the stage of his psychic life. The woman, in turn, projects her animus onto a man who embodies strength, direction, intelligence, or power. These projections create immediate and powerful fascination, but also a dangerous illusion. The other is not seen as they are, but as a vessel for unrecognized inner parts. With time, these projections lose force and reality emerges. At this point, many relationships enter crisis, as partners feel betrayed by an image that in truth never existed. Yet for those committed to awareness and self-knowledge, this is the most fertile moment of the relationship, when the fall of projection invites the integration of inner aspects, not dependence on the other to realize them. To integrate animus and anima means to recognize and cultivate within oneself the qualities we once sought in a partner. For men, it means embracing and giving voice to sensitivity, intuition, the capacity to relate to the invisible. For women, it is the opportunity to cultivate structured reason, assertiveness, clarity in action, and sovereignty over their own choices. When these aspects are balanced internally, the relationship transforms, for it is no longer based on lack, but on full presence. The conscious experience of love requires this reintegration. A man unaware of his anima tends to seek endlessly for a woman to complete him, and vice versa. But this external search reflects an inner incompleteness. By working on these archetypes, partners cease to be blind mirrors and become companions on the journey. Love ceases to be a romantic illusion and becomes a continuous practice of awakening. The integration process is neither linear nor painless. It requires acknowledging old wounds, family patterns, ingrained beliefs. It demands deep listening to what was denied, to silenced inner voices, to repressed desires. The animus, when unconscious, can manifest as a critical and destructive force within a woman, the infamous inner judge that sabotages her choices. The anima, when unintegrated, may appear in a man as uncontrolled emotional impulses or as a constant affective void. Naming these movements is the first step to transforming them. When integration begins to take place, the relationship changes. Partners start communicating more transparently, not as two halves in search of completion, but as two wholes willing to share their journey. Conscious love arises from psychic maturity and the willingness to look inward before demanding from the other what is still missing within. Empathy grows, judgment lessens, and the bond deepens. This maturity does not eliminate conflict, but changes its nature. Disagreements cease to be battles for power or validation and become opportunities for growth. Conscious love is that which embraces shadow, honors light, recognizes cycles, and commits to truth. And this truth begins within, in how each relates to their own inner archetypes. To integrate animus and anima is, therefore, one of the deepest keys to loving authentically. It is recognizing that the other did not come to complete us, but to mirror us. That love is not a destination, but a path, walked day after day, choice after choice, with the courage to be whole before the other. On this path, the universe does not shout, it whispers. And those who have found inner silence learn to listen. True love does not reveal itself through grand promises or external guarantees. It emerges in inner silence, in the encounters that pierce us, in the experiences that transform us from within. In the light of Jungian psychology, we understand that deep love is that which awakens the soul to its own wholeness, leading to the integration of shadow, projections, archetypes, and opposites that inhabit the psyche. The other is not destiny, but mirror, not salvation, but portal. When the universe whispers, it does so through feeling, symbol, and synchronicity, and it is up to each of us to learn to listen. If this journey resonated with you, if something within you was touched by these words, then perhaps you are already hearing this silent whisper pointing to a truer love, one that begins within yourself. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to keep diving into content that unites deep psychology and inner transformation. And if you want to go even further, click on the video now appearing on the screen. The path of individuation is continuous, and every conscious step is a way of loving better.